She said, "You're always in the clouds. Dreams don't pay the bills." And then she just left. To a successful lawyer. Said I was a liability. I didn't argue. I just kept working. A year later, I sold my startup for $3.5 million. dollars. And the first thing I did was make a donation in her name. I've always prided myself on being a realist. It's something I told myself, something I had to remind myself every time my mind wandered to the what ifs. Life wasn't about living in a fantasy world. It was about surviving, thriving if you were lucky, the kind of luck I never expected. But when I met Lila, something in me shifted. It wasn't just that she was beautiful. Sure, she was. But there was something else about her, something different. She had this spark, a fire that drew people in, like a moth to a flame. When she looked at you, you felt like the center of the universe. For someone like me, that kind of attention was intoxicating. She had this way of making everything feel like it mattered. Her dreams, her ambitions, even her worries. At the time, I was buried in my startup. Nights turned into early mornings and I'd lose myself in the code, in the hustle. My company wasn't even a company yet. It was an idea, but I believed in it, like it was my only chance. A chance to escape the mundane, the mediocrity I'd been surrounded by all my life. And at first, Lila supported me. She saw the potential, or at least that's how it felt. She'd listen to me ramble on about ideas, about strategies. When she kissed me, it felt like I could take on the world. I'd think to myself, this is it. This is the person I'll build my life with. But as the days turned into weeks, then months, something started to shift. I wasn't blind to it, but I told myself it was just a phase. Maybe it was just stress from her law school exams, or the pressure of balancing her own future with my unsteady one. There were the subtle things at first. She'd make little comments when I was talking about the future, dismissive ones. I could almost hear the unspoken, "You'll never make it," beneath her laughter. But she never said it outright. Not until that night. That night it hit me. We'd gone out to eat. Nothing fancy, just a small diner. It was supposed to be one of those rare evenings where we could talk and just be. I remember sitting across from her, my hands resting on the table, nervous but excited. There was something in the air, a tension I couldn't place. I was talking about some new idea I had for the business, some new feature I wanted to build into the product. I could tell I was getting passionate because my words were faster, more desperate. And that's when she did it. "You know you can't pay the bills with dreams, right?" she said, her voice sharp, dismissive. She was looking at me, but not really looking. Like I was just some project she was tired of. It wasn't the words themselves, not really. It was the way she said them, the tone, as if she'd heard it all before, as if my ambitions didn't matter, as if they weren't worth a damn. For a second, I thought I misheard her. But then she followed up. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" she continued, shaking her head. "You'll always be stuck in this." She motioned vaguely at the room, at me, at my life. "This dream you're chasing." And that was when I felt it. The finality, the humiliation. It wasn't just the comment. It was the way she was looking at me now. With pity, with disappointment. The look you give a kid when they don't know any better. I tried to laugh it off, to shrug it off. "You don't get it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is real, Lila. I'm building something. I just need time." But she didn't respond. Instead, she sighed as if she were explaining something to a child. "Time?" she asked, and there was a hint of mockery in her voice. "Time doesn't pay the rent, babe. Money pays the rent." That night I stayed silent, the words echoing in my head long after she'd left. She didn't say it outright, but it was clear. I was a failure in her eyes. I could feel it. I was a loser in her eyes, and nothing I could ever do would change that. It wasn't the first time she'd been distant. It wasn't even the first time she'd made a comment like that. But this time, it felt different, like she was closing a door on me, on us, as if everything I had worked for was nothing more than a dream, a foolish fantasy. She left that night, packed her things, called a cab, and left without a single tear. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no angry confrontation, just a simple, quiet departure. She left me for him, A lawyer with money, connections, a real future. The kind of future I couldn't offer her. And in the end, she wasn't wrong. She was right, actually. She didn't need me. Not when she could have someone who could give her everything I couldn't. The car, the house, the security. She deserved better, she said. She didn't say it in so many words, but I heard it in every syllable. And me? I was left behind, the broken dreamer. The guy who had too much ambition and not enough reality. But here's the thing. I wasn't broken. Not yet. That's when I made the choice. The choice to keep going. Not to chase her, not to get her back, but to prove her wrong. I didn't need her. I needed the dream, and I was going to build it. The months that followed felt like a blur. I kept my head down, buried myself in work. Every morning I woke up to the harsh light of my laptop screen, the only companion I had. The glow of the screen felt warmer than any human contact. The world outside, with its distractions and people, faded into the background. I needed to keep moving forward, to focus on the one thing that had never let me down. My business. Lila's absence felt like a void I couldn't fill, and yet I didn't care to. At first it stung. Of course it did. She was everything I'd imagined a future with. The nights we'd spent laughing, the quiet moments when she'd rest her head on my shoulder as I worked. They replayed in my mind like a broken record, looping endlessly. But then something strange happened. I started to feel less. The pain became something distant, like a far-off memory that I couldn't quite touch anymore. In a way, that was worse than the hurt. It wasn't the absence of her that gnawed at me. It was the realization that I didn't need her in my life anymore. I didn't need the validation, the reassurance. I needed to prove something. Not to her, not to anyone else, but to myself. I knew I couldn't rely on anyone's support. Not on Lila's, not on friends or family who didn't understand what I was trying to do. The people around me, they either pitied me or thought I was delusional. "You're still doing that startup thing?" one of my old friends asked me at a bar one night. "Man, that's cool. But you sure it's going to work? You're running out of time." Time, I hated that word. It had always been a reminder of how little I had, how far behind I was. But now, time had become my ally. It was the one thing that no one could take away from me. The one thing that, with enough patience, would make everything fall into place. Every day I spent in silence, focusing on my work, was a day closer to proving that everything I believed in was real. I didn't need Lila's approval, and I certainly didn't need her to tell me that my dreams were worthless. I was building something bigger than any of us, and one day, when the world saw it, they'd understand. I started to understand, too, what it meant to truly work in silence. The kind of work where your every move is a step toward the future. I didn't seek praise, didn't ask for recognition. I simply worked. The hum of the office around me, the only sound that kept me going. No more chatter, no more noise. Just me, the code, the data, and the business. I began to see the results, but I didn't let myself get excited. There was too much at stake. I had to remain focused. I knew the end game. It was never about surviving the day-to-day struggles. It was about the day when I'd have everything. The day when I'd have the last laugh. I didn't know how long it would take to get there. Months? Years? I couldn't say. But I knew one thing. I would make it. And when I did, I would make sure she knew. Not just her, but everyone who doubted me. By now, I had let the outside world fade into the background. I had no time for distractions, no time to mourn what was lost. The world was full of people who couldn't see what I saw, and I didn't care anymore. I was so far removed from who I used to be, it was almost like I had reinvented myself. But I wasn't the same person I had been when Lila left me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was better. And for the first time in months, I stopped thinking about the old life, about the nights we'd spent together and how easily they'd crumbled. Instead, I focused on the work. I focused on the mission. I didn't need to fight or yell. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I was already winning. I just needed to see it through. And then it happened. I got my first real investor. The email came late one night. I didn't even realize what it was at first. It was a message from a venture capitalist I had been pitching for months, someone I barely thought would respond. I clicked open the email, expecting another polite, "Thank you, but no thanks." But instead, the words, "we're in," hit me like a freight train. I sat there for a long moment, frozen. It was surreal. All that work, all those sleepless nights, it was starting to pay off. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot, but it was a turning point. The first step towards something big. The investment wasn't huge, but it was enough to give me the breathing room I needed. It was the green light. From that point forward, the momentum started to build. I worked harder, faster, smarter. I knew I was onto something. The feeling that had once seemed like a distant dream was now a tangible reality. But I didn't get too comfortable. I kept my head down, just as I had been doing from the start. I didn't want anyone to know what was coming. And as the business began to grow, so did the realization that I was closer than ever to making her see everything she missed. In the silence, I had become unstoppable. The days blurred together as I moved toward the final goal. The company was thriving, my vision slowly but surely taking shape. I was no longer that guy who was building something from nothing. I was becoming the guy everyone in the room wanted to talk to. The investors started to see the value in what I was doing. They liked the product, the growth, the numbers, and slowly I was starting to get that sense of satisfaction, the one I'd been chasing all along. But even as success began to loom over me, I stayed focused, relentless. The same discipline that had fueled me during the dark months, when all I had was the hum of my computer and a few lines of code, still drove me forward. I knew that the moment I let up, I'd lose it all. And then it came. A buyout offer. The first one I'd gotten in the last year. A big one. One that could change everything. The email came in late one afternoon. I had just finished a conference call with my team, the weight of the day sinking in as I clicked through my inbox. And there it was. A formal offer from one of the top law firms in the city. The law firm. They had been watching my startup for a while now, and they wanted to buy. It was everything I'd worked for, all wrapped up in one big deal. The terms were more than fair, but it wasn't just the money, it was the validation. They offered $3.5 million for the company. It was a lot, more than I could have imagined when I first started out, and more than I could have ever dreamed I would earn after Lila had torn me apart and left for a man who could pay the bills. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the offer. $3.5 million. It was the kind of money I never thought I'd see in my bank account. It was real. And for a moment, I just let myself feel it. The sense of accomplishment. The idea that I had done this all by myself. No one had helped me. No one had believed in me. I had built it all. But as always, my mind turned back to her, to Lila. The thing was, I wasn't even sure I still hated her. I didn't need to. I had outgrown the need to care. In some strange way, I was grateful for what she had done. If she hadn't walked away, I might not have been able to push myself the way I had. Her departure was the catalyst for this whole journey. But it didn't change the fact that she had humiliated me, made me feel like a failure, and discarded me as soon as the going got tough. What was I going to do now? Take the money? It was tempting, but that wasn't enough. There had to be more. I needed something else. Something to make her feel the weight of what she'd done to me. Something that would make her realize just how wrong she was about me. I already had a plan. I wasn't going to take a big public victory lap or flaunt my success. That would be too easy. I wasn't interested in rubbing her nose in it or getting some petty revenge. I was going to do something smarter, something colder. I spent the next few days locked in my office, going over the details of the deal. I wasn't rushing to sign anything. I had everything I needed already. I just needed to finalize the terms, ensure everything was in place. And while I was preparing for that, something else was taking shape in the background. A few years ago, I had come across a foundation dedicated to helping men who had been victims of toxic relationships. Men who had been manipulated, belittled, and discarded. I had forgotten about it for a while, but now it seemed like the perfect opportunity. It wasn't enough to just sell the company. I needed to give her a reminder of everything she had missed. A gift, not something flashy, not something that would be immediately recognizable as revenge. No, this was going to be far subtler. I wasn't interested in a showdown or some dramatic confrontation. I didn't need that kind of closure. I would make a donation in her name, a big one, The foundation was still active, and I knew they would appreciate the donation. The kind of donation that would get attention. The kind that would be public, so Lila would see it. She would hear her name on the news or on social media in connection with a cause she would never want to be associated with. She always thought she was so much better than me, that she could do better, that she deserved someone with money, with status. She never understood the value of hard work or the quiet strength it took to build something from the ground up. She didn't understand what it meant to fight for something you believe in, even when the world told you you were wrong. The thought of her finding out, of seeing her name connected to this cause, gave me a small, cold satisfaction. It wasn't about proving I was better than her. I had already done that. It was about showing her how far I had come, how little I cared about her opinions now. It was about her understanding, in the quietest possible way, that I had won. I had built this on my own. I had earned this. And now I was going to use my success to make sure she never forgot how wrong she was. And then, when it was done, I would walk away from her for good. I would be free. The next day, I clicked accept on the deal, signing the exit papers. I didn't smile. I didn't feel elated. It was just a step, one more move in the long game I had been playing for the past year. But I was close now. I could feel it. And this was only the beginning. The days after the deal were a blur of celebrations and transitions. The checks were deposited into my bank account, the paperwork was signed, and I could finally look back and say I had made it. But while everyone else was congratulating me, part of me remained calm, even detached. I had done this for myself, but there was still one more piece to put into place: the donation. I knew Lila had been watching me. She would have to be. It wasn't every day that a guy like me, who she had dismissed as a failure, pulled off something this big. She had to be curious, and I intended to make sure she saw it. I'd heard through a few mutual acquaintances that she had been making a name for herself in the local charity scene. She liked to play the part of the philanthropist, always eager to be seen in the right circles, doing the right things. A woman who loved attention. That would make this gift all the more delicious. I made sure the donation was large enough to turn heads, enough to get her attention, but not so much that it felt over the top. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of thinking I had done this out of guilt or insecurity. No, this was calculated, cold. The exact kind of thing she would never expect from me. A reminder that her actions had consequences, and that I was in control now. The foundation's spokesperson contacted me the day they received the donation. They were thrilled, of course. This was exactly the kind of funding they needed to keep their programs running. But what caught my attention was when she said, "We've already received a few inquiries. Apparently the donation was linked to a certain name, and people are starting to talk." That was exactly what I wanted. I didn't need to be the one to tell her. I didn't need to confront her or try to explain. The ripple effect would do all the work for me. I went about my life, quietly enjoying the results of the sale. I didn't need to make a spectacle of my success. My real victory wasn't in the money. It was in the way I had quietly built this empire step by step, while she had underestimated me, while she had believed that my dreams weren't worth anything. But then it happened. A week later, I got a call from a blocked number. I didn't recognize the voice when I picked up, but there was no mistaking the underlying tension. "Do you know what you've done?" Lila's voice was tight, strained. The woman who had once been so sure of herself now sounded fragile, almost panicked. I sat back in my chair, letting her stew in the silence for a moment. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" There was a pause on the other end, before she spoke again. "The donation, I saw it. You made a donation to that foundation." Her voice faltered, but I could tell she was trying to keep her composure. She always did. I could almost picture her in that moment, pacing back and forth, her mind racing to figure out how to spin this in her favor. She had always been good at that, always had the right words for every situation. But there was no way to fix this, no way to spin it. "The Men's Rights Foundation, right?" I said, the words coming out easy, casual. "I thought it was a worthy cause. It's a shame to see how many men are left behind in relationships where they've been manipulated, belittled, and taken advantage of. I'm glad to contribute." Her silence was thick. I could almost hear her grinding her teeth, trying to make sense of it all. You think this is funny? Her voice had a bite to it now. You think this is some kind of joke? I let out a small, almost imperceptible laugh. Funny. Number. But I do think it's fitting. You always said I couldn't pay the bills with dreams. Well, I just paid them with reality. I could almost hear her trying to control her emotions. She had always been so composed when she wanted something, when she was in control. But this was different. She wasn't in control anymore. And the realization was hitting her like a freight train. You don't get to do this, she said, her voice trembling now. You can't just throw money at this and make everything okay. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. It's not about making things okay, Lila. It's about making sure you never forget what you did. You didn't just leave me. You humiliated me. You tried to make me feel small, like I was worthless. But here I am, more than you ever imagined I could be. And you? You're stuck with your decisions. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. It stretched out until I almost thought she might hang up. But then finally she spoke again, and I could hear the cracks in her voice. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, her words softening. But even now I wasn't convinced. I was just looking for something more, something better. Funny, I said, my voice colder now. I thought you were the one looking for more. Turns out, I'm the one who ended up with everything. The silence stretched even longer this time. I could hear her breathing heavily, the weight of everything I had said sinking in. There was no comeback, no defense, just the reality of the situation. I guess that's it then, she finally said, her voice distant. I won't bother you again. And just like that, the conversation was over. She had nothing left to say. I sat back, letting the finality of it all settle in. This wasn't a moment of triumph. It wasn't a victory that needed to be shouted from the rooftops. It was something far quieter, more personal, a reminder to both of us that I had risen above everything she had ever said about me, everything she had tried to do to tear me down. And that was enough. In the end, it wasn't about the money. It was about the lesson I had learned. I wasn't just a guy who had succeeded. I was the guy who had stayed true to himself when the world told me I was nothing. I had built this empire with my own hands, and no one, not even Lila, could take that away from me. As for her, well, I had already given her what she needed to remember me by, and that was all I ever needed.